I've wanted to be just married and happy for a long time.
But we are now rising, and we're becoming an enormously strong, huge group of women who are very active and want to stay looking and feeling terrific and being attractive to their husbands.
They were some of the most photographed women in the world. Their names were on marquees, their faces were on magazine covers, and the public believed, genuinely believed, that if anyone had earned the right to a happy, honest marriage, it was them. But behind the glamour of old Hollywood, behind the carefully arranged studio portraits and the planted gossip columns, a quiet and devastating truth was playing out in the private lives of some of the most beloved women of the 20th century. These were women married to men whose private lives bore almost no resemblance to the roles they performed as husbands. And in most cases, the world would not find out for decades. This is not rumor. This is not tabloid speculation. This is the documented, biographical, a historically verified account of 11 remarkable women, actresses, performers, royalty, who deserved far better than what they were quietly handed. Let us begin. Number 1, Judy Garland. Judy Garland spent the majority of her life being adored by the public, and few careers in the history of Hollywood matched hers for sheer emotional intensity. She was not merely a star. She was a phenomenon, a woman whose voice, vulnerability, and screen presence made her feel, to millions of ordinary people, almost untouchable. The kind of performer who makes audiences feel that they personally know her, that something real is being exchanged every time she opens her mouth to sing. And yet fame, as history repeatedly demonstrates, has never once guaranteed peace behind closed doors. By the time Garland married director Vincente Minnelli in 1945, she was already one of the most recognizable women in America. She was 22 years old, luminous, celebrated, and still young enough to hold on to the belief that love might finally bring the stability that her extraordinary public life had never quite managed to provide. Minnelli, for his part, was elegant, gifted, and rising fast within the Hollywood system. He was a director of remarkable visual sensibility, a man whose instincts for color, composition, and atmosphere set him apart from his contemporaries. From the outside, the union looked precisely as it was meant to look: two brilliant artistic souls choosing one another, a marriage that made aesthetic sense, romantic sense, and professional sense all at once. Together, they fit the image that Hollywood loved to sell: beauty, talent, sophistication, and promise. Their daughter, Liza Minnelli, would herself go on to become one of the defining performers of her generation, a fact that gives the partnership a legacy no amount of private complication can erase. But appearances have a way of protecting a marriage far more than they explain it. And over time, Vincente Minnelli's private life came to be viewed as considerably more complex than the public once understood. Later biographies and accounts, serious, documented, carefully researched, would describe him as a man whose emotional and romantic world did not fit neatly into the role of a conventional husband. Whether Judy understood that fully at the beginning of the marriage remains unclear. What feels far easier to believe is that she entered it hoping for something wholehearted, something honest, something complete. That is precisely what makes the story sting. The deepest sadness here is not simply that Minnelli may have carried private truths that Judy never fully saw. It is that a woman who gave so much of herself to the world, who stood before audiences night after night and handed them everything she had, may have spent part of her own marriage reaching for a kind of emotional honesty and genuine closeness that never completely arrived. Number 2, Angela Lansbury. Angela Lansbury was barely out of her teens when she married Richard Cromwell, and that single fact alone lends the story a particular kind of sadness. The sadness of youth, walking into a situation it has not yet been equipped to understand. She was talented, intelligent, and already moving through Hollywood with a maturity that belied her years. Even at that age, a Lansbury was not a passive figure. She had genuine craft, genuine intelligence, and a level of professional focus that would eventually make her one of the most enduring careers in the history of both stage and screen. But she was still very young when she stepped into this marriage, one that appeared to promise security, respectability, and the kind of settled adult life that Hollywood could occasionally offer to its rising young players. Cromwell was older and already established. From the outside, the union looked like a perfectly sensible studio-era match, the kind of arrangement that could quietly settle a promising young actress into the image that Hollywood preferred to project. A respectable union, a stable foundation. The marriage collapsed almost immediately. It lasted only a matter of months. And for years, it stood as one of those strange, brief old Hollywood footnotes. The kind of thing that gets a passing sentence in a biography and not much more. Too short to explain, too quiet to scandalize. But later accounts and Cromwell's own place in the broader historical record of gay actors working during that era cast the marriage in an entirely different light. Over time, the union came to be understood less as a true romantic partnership and more as something that was, from the very beginning, emotionally mismatched in ways that a young Angela Lansbury would have had no reason to fully anticipate. Whether she knew the whole truth when she married him is impossible to state with certainty. What seems far more likely is that she entered the relationship with considerably more belief than experience. And that is where the heartbreak genuinely sits. Not in public scandal, not simply in the speed of the dissolution, but in the possibility that Angela Lansbury began her married life before she had any real basis for understanding how incomplete that marriage may have already been before it even started. For a young woman standing at the threshold of adulthood, that kind of foundational disappointment tends to leave a mark long after the legal formalities are finished. Number 3. Phyllis Gates. When Phyllis Gates married Rock Hudson in 1955, the union looked like something assembled specifically for the front pages. Hudson was, at that precise moment, one of the most desired men in the entirety of Hollywood. Tall, physically imposing, handsome in a way that the camera loved absolutely, and already well on his way to becoming the kind of leading man that the major studios treated as a financial asset of the highest order. Gates, it should be noted, was not merely some anonymous woman pulled into a famous man's orbit. She worked inside the industry. She understood with a degree of clarity that many outsiders did not possess how carefully images were managed in that world, how deliberately every public presentation was constructed, controlled, and maintained. She stepped into a marriage that appeared to offer her status, legitimacy, and a future tied directly to one of the biggest names of the era. From the outside, it looked convincing enough to silence most questions, but that may be precisely what gives the story its sadness now. The marriage lasted only a few years, and almost from the beginning, it appeared burdened by distance, by pressure, and by the persistent sense that something essential was absent. Over time, as Rock Hudson's life came to be understood far more fully by biographers, historians, and those who knew him personally, the marriage itself was re-examined in a considerably harsher light. Later accounts would frame it as one of old Hollywood's most famous unions, one shadowed by secrecy, image control, and truths that may never have been communicated equally between both parties. The machinery of the studio system, at its most calculated, could produce exactly this kind of arrangement, a marriage designed in significant part to manage a public narrative rather than to honor a private one. What makes Phyllis Gates more than a footnote in Rock Hudson's story is precisely this. The real heartbreak may be that she entered the marriage believing it was real in the way marriages are supposed to be real. Whether she knew part of the truth, suspected certain fragments of it, or was kept far more thoroughly in the dark than most people have acknowledged, remains a matter of genuine historical debate. But what lingers and what cannot easily be dismissed is the possibility that she gave her name, her trust, and years of her life to a relationship that may never have fully belonged to her in the first place. Number 4. Barry Berenson. Barry Berenson seemed, by every visible measure, to belong to a world of beauty, refinement, and effortless sophistication. A model, a photographer, and a member of a family already woven into the fabric of fame and culture. She moved through life with a kind of grace that people often mistake for protection, as though elegance itself might shield a person from certain kinds of pain. So, when she married Anthony Perkins, the match looked not only glamorous but entirely believable. Perkins was intelligent, famous, and forever attached in the public imagination to one of cinema's most haunting performances. To the world, they appeared to be an unusual but rather compelling couple, the sort of pair whose mystery only made them more fascinating to observe from a distance. But mystery inside a marriage can feel entirely different from mystery viewed from the outside. Over the years, Perkins's private life came to be understood as far more layered than the public image he had long maintained. Later accounts made it clear that his emotional and sexual history did not fit the straightforward picture of a conventional husband, and that the truth surrounding him had long been considerably more complex than most people had appreciated. Whether Barry understood all of that from the very beginning is not something anyone can state with total confidence. What matters more is the emotional reality of the marriage itself, what it may have asked her to accept, to ignore, or simply to live alongside day after day. That is where the sadness ultimately settles. Barry Berenson may not have entered the marriage looking for illusion. She may have wanted precisely what many women want: love, honesty, genuine closeness, and a life built on something solid and reciprocal. Instead, she appears to have shared her life with a man whose inner world was considerably more guarded than it appeared on the surface. And the heartbreak lies not only in what he concealed, but in the possibility that a meaningful portion of that marriage was never fully available to her at all. Number 5, Elsa Lanchester. Elsa Lanchester had the kind of presence people genuinely did not forget. She was witty, unconventional, and talented in a manner that made her feel considerably larger than many of the roles she was handed. Hers was not the career of a passive woman waiting to be discovered. She was a formidable figure in her own right, a genuine original, sharp and alive in every performance she gave. By the time she married Charles Laughton, one of the most commanding actors of his generation, on a man whose performances remain studied today, she was not simply attaching herself to a more famous man. She was entering what appeared, from the outside, to be a union between equals. Strange, perhaps, in the way that certain theatrical marriages always seem strange to outsiders, but deeply bonded, built on intelligence, artistry, and something that looked very much like mutual admiration. To the world, theirs seemed like a genuine partnership. And yet some marriages appear complete, mainly because the exterior has been arranged so well. As the years passed, Laughton's private life came to be understood as considerably more complicated than public appearances had ever suggested. Later biographies and accounts would portray him as a man whose emotional and romantic life did not sit comfortably within the image of a conventional husband. The historical record on this point has become increasingly clear over the decades. Whether Elsa understood that fully from the very beginning, or whether she came to understand it gradually over weeks, months, or years of quiet accumulation, remains harder to determine with precision. What seems clearer is that their marriage occupied a particular kind of emotional space, somewhere between genuine companionship and concealment, between real attachment and something less than fully shared. That is what gives Elsa's story its particular emotional weight. The sadness is not simply that Charles Laughton may have carried truths the world was not openly naming at the time. It is that Elsa Lanchester, a woman as vivid, as emotionally alive, and as perceptive as she clearly was, may have spent years inside a marriage that offered loyalty and partnership in certain respects, while withholding the kind of emotional transparency that any wife might reasonably expect from the person standing closest to her. The real tragedy here may not be scandal at all. It may be the far quieter reality of loving someone who could never completely meet you in the place where marriage is supposed to be most honest. Number 6. Janet Gaynor. Janet Gaynor was one of the first true queens of the American screen, a woman whose face seemed capable of holding both innocence and quiet strength in the same expression, who represented, in the years before Hollywood grew louder and considerably harsher, a softer and more considered kind of stardom. She was elegant, admired, and instantly recognizable as one of the defining faces of her era. So when she married Adrian, the legendary costume designer responsible for some of the most breathtaking and technically accomplished looks in the entire history of film, the match seemed entirely natural. It looked stylish, sophisticated, and perfectly suited to old Hollywood's enduring fondness for beautiful, carefully arranged public unions. Two creative figures, both operating at the very top of their respective crafts, choosing one another. But some marriages look complete, mainly because the outside has been arranged so effectively. Over time, Adrian's private life came to be viewed through a decidedly different lens, and the marriage itself was discussed with increasing frequency as something rather more complicated than a traditional romantic partnership. Later accounts and Hollywood histories would suggest that what appeared polished and entirely enviable on the surface may also have served another purpose, one tied to image management, professional discretion, and the deeply restrictive social expectations of that particular era. Whether Janet fully understood all of that when she entered the marriage is genuinely difficult to establish. What seems far more probable is that she stepped into it believing it offered a real future, not merely a beautiful arrangement, but something emotionally genuine. That is where the sadness lives. Janet Gaynor may have found companionship, mutual respect, and shared social standing. And those are not nothing. But they are not always the same thing as emotional truth. The quiet heartbreak in her story is the possibility that she gave herself entirely to a marriage that looked whole from the outside while remaining incomplete in ways she may have only gradually come to feel. And in old Hollywood, where appearances were everything and privacy was a commodity traded in careful silence, that may have been the cruelest part of all. A marriage could appear perfectly intact long before it was ever fully real. Number 7. Charlotte Raye. Charlotte Raye built her career on warmth. Even when she played sharp, funny, or deliberately difficult women, there was something deeply and unmistakably human about her, something that made audiences feel as though they actually knew her. That quality made her memorable on screen in a way that outlasted trends and survived the passage of decades. But it also gives her private life a particularly poignant quality. When she married composer John Strauss, the marriage likely appeared to represent exactly what it looked like on the surface: the beginning of a stable adult life, a partnership built on shared talent, mutual understanding, and genuine companionship. From the outside, there was no obvious reason to suspect that anything essential was missing. But some marriages do not fall apart because of a single explosive confrontation or one decisive betrayal. They become painful because one person slowly arrives at the realization that they are living beside a truth they cannot fully access, a truth that shapes everything and yet remains just out of reach. In later years, Charlotte Raye spoke about this openly and with remarkable directness. She spoke about the emotional complexity of her marriage and about the fact that Strauss was gay. That decision to speak honestly, to refuse the silence that so many women of her generation maintained around precisely this kind of private pain, gives the story an unusual and significant weight. It shifts the focus away from rumor, away from the usual evasions, and places it firmly on emotional reality. Whatever she understood at the beginning, it is clear that the marriage eventually placed her in a position that was both lonely and genuinely difficult. A position in which love, loyalty, confusion, and disappointment could all exist simultaneously without canceling one another out. That is what makes Charlotte Raye's story feel so particularly sad. The heartbreak was not simply that her husband carried a truth he could not fully live out in public. It was that she too was required to live with the consequences of that silence. For all her talent and considerable personal strength, she may have spent years attempting to build genuine closeness inside a marriage that could never fully return what she brought into it. And that kind of quiet, sustained emotional imbalance, the kind that never announces itself dramatically, but simply persists, tends to leave the deepest wounds. Number 8. Carol Channing. Carol Channing had a presence that was, by any objective measure, completely impossible to mistake. She was bright, theatrical, funny in a way that was entirely her own, and so unmistakably herself that audiences remembered her the moment she walked onto a stage. With that kind of larger-than-life charm, that enormous combustible energy, it would be easy to assume that she was always in control of her own story. That someone that vivid, that self-possessed, that thoroughly present in every room she entered would be immune to the particular kind of emotional confusion that marriage can quietly produce. But fame does not protect anyone from that, not even Carol Channing. When she built a life with Charles Lowe, the relationship appeared to offer genuine companionship, loyalty, and the kind of stable private existence that matters enormously to people who spend the majority of their professional lives in the full glare of public scrutiny. From the outside, there was little obvious reason to question the shape of that arrangement. It appeared functional, devoted, and steady. But as the years passed, the marriage came to seem considerably more complicated than it had first presented itself. Later accounts cast Lowe in a very different light, suggesting that his private life carried truths that did not fit comfortably within the role of a conventional husband. Whether Carol understood the full picture from the beginning is genuinely difficult to establish with any certainty. What feels considerably more plausible is that she entered the marriage hoping for something emotionally real, not something partial, not something guarded, not something fundamentally incomplete. And that is precisely where the sadness of her story begins to accumulate. Carol Channing gave so much of herself to the public, with a generosity and openness that defined her entire career. And yet, in her own private life, she may have been living beside a truth that never fully disclosed itself to her. The real heartbreak is not simply that her husband may have kept part of himself hidden. It is that a woman so vivid, so open, and so genuinely full of life may have spent years inside a marriage that could not meet her with the same degree of honesty she deserved. Number 9. Princess Margaret. Princess Margaret had spent the entirety of her life being watched, not occasionally, not when it was convenient, but constantly. From childhood onward, in the most relentlessly scrutinized royal household in the world, every smile, every dress, every rumor, and every romance was examined as though the public held a personal claim on her private happiness. As she had already endured the painfully public collapse of her relationship with Group Captain Peter Townsend, a man she had loved and been formally prevented from marrying. The toll of that episode, well documented and long studied, was considerable. So when she married Anthony Armstrong Jones in 1960, the match seemed to offer something genuinely different, something modern, glamorous, and emotionally alive. He was creative, sophisticated, and unlike the stiff, predictable aristocratic mold that typically surrounded the royal household. He was a photographer, an artist by inclination and profession, and the public responded to the union with something approaching genuine excitement. To the world, the marriage looked fresh, even daring, and almost like proof that even a princess constrained by protocol and duty could still choose love on her own terms. But some marriages begin to deteriorate long before the world notices the first visible cracks. What first appeared vibrant and admirably unconventional gradually came to seem colder, lonelier, and far more complicated than the photographs and public engagements had been suggesting. As the years passed, Armstrong Jones's private life came under increasing scrutiny, and the carefully maintained image of him as a devoted and straightforward royal husband grew progressively harder to sustain. Later accounts would construct a picture of a man whose emotional and sexual life was considerably more layered than the public had ever been invited to assume. Whether Margaret understood the full extent of that complexity from the very beginning is impossible to know with certainty. What feels far easier to imagine, and what the historical record increasingly supports, is that she entered the marriage genuinely hoping for devotion and honesty, only to find herself living beside a distance she could not fully close. That is what makes her story feel so profoundly sad beneath all the glamour and all the ceremony. The heartbreak may not simply be that her husband led a life more complicated than the public role he performed. It is that a woman born into unrelenting scrutiny, a woman who had already been denied so much personal freedom by the institution she was born into, may have entered one of the most significant relationships of her entire life only to discover that even there, in what was supposed to be her most private space, she was not being given the whole truth. Number 10. Martha Raye. Martha Raye lived loudly. She was bold, utterly unmistakable, and so full of force and combustible energy that people consistently assumed she could handle absolutely anything that life decided to throw at her. On stage and on screen, she projected confidence, physical comedy, and a larger-than-life spirit that made her seem almost constitutionally impossible to wound. She was one of those performers who appear to operate on a different scale entirely from ordinary human vulnerability. But private life does not spare strong women simply because they appear formidable in public. And when she married Mark Harris, the relationship appeared to offer genuine companionship and the kind of lasting devotion that becomes especially valuable after long years under the relentless pressure of public visibility. From a distance, the marriage looked like something built on loyalty and real commitment. But distance, as has already been established several times in this account, has a persistent tendency to make marriages look considerably simpler than they actually are. Over time, Harris came to be seen as a far more complicated figure than the devoted husband role he occupied in public perception. Later accounts cast his private life in an entirely different light, raising the well-documented possibility that Martha may not have been in possession of the full emotional truth of the relationship from the very beginning. Whether she knew fragments of it, whether she chose to set certain things aside, or whether she only came to understand the full picture much later remains genuinely difficult to determine. What feels clearer is that the marriage may have asked her to live inside an arrangement that presented the outward appearance of stability while withholding something essential, something that should, in an honest marriage, have been available to her from the start. That is what makes Martha Raye's story feel so sad beneath all the spectacle of her public image. The heartbreak may not simply be that her husband carried private truths he kept closely guarded. It is that a woman known for such exceptional force and vitality, a woman who gave everything in performance, every single time, may have spent a significant portion of her life inside a marriage that could not return the honesty and emotional openness she deserved. And sometimes the loneliest marriages are not the ones that collapse dramatically in public. They are the ones that leave one person quietly, privately, living with considerably less than they were led to believe they had. Number 11. Amanda Blake. Amanda Blake had the kind of fame that made her feel instantly and personally familiar to the American public. On television, on Gunsmoke, which ran for 20 seasons and made her one of the most consistently visible faces in the history of American broadcasting. She projected confidence, spirit, and a kind of emotional directness that made audiences genuinely trust her. She was not simply popular, she was beloved, and the sort of performer people felt they had grown up alongside. And that is part of what gives her private life such a particularly lingering sadness. When she married Mark Spythe, the relationship appeared to offer something she had perhaps been seeking for some time: genuine companionship, steadiness, and something real away from the considerable glare of celebrity. From the outside, there was nothing in the visible arrangement to suggest that the marriage would later come to be remembered for anything other than its eventual heartbreak. No obvious warning signs, no public turbulence, no dramatic collapse. But some heartbreaks only reveal their full shape in retrospect. After Spythe's death, revelations about his private life cast the marriage in a far darker and considerably more complicated light. A later account suggested strongly that he had been living with truths that Amanda may not have fully understood, that the relationship contained hidden realities extending well beyond what any wife would reasonably expect from an honest and reciprocal partnership. Whether she suspected certain fragments of this, whether there were moments of quiet, unspoken comprehension, or whether she was kept largely from the full picture for the duration of the marriage, all of that remains genuinely difficult to establish with precision. What matters more is the emotional reality that follows from the very possibility. A marriage can survive a great many things. It can survive disagreement, distance, professional pressure, and the particular strains that public life places on private relationships. But it becomes something fundamentally and perhaps irreparably different when one person is living alongside a truth they were never fully invited to know, a truth that was never honestly extended to them. That is where Amanda Blake's story becomes considerably more than a footnote in the history of classic American television. The sadness is not simply in what her husband may have concealed from her. It is in what she may have been denied: clarity, mutual honesty, and the straightforward sense of being genuinely known inside her own marriage. For a woman who appeared so open in her public life, so direct, and so present in every performance she gave, the idea that her private life may have been shaped by that kind of hidden and sustained distance makes the story feel all the more deeply tragic. These were not passive women, and they were not naive women. They were, in every case, women of genuine talent, genuine intelligence, and genuine emotional depth. And yet, the institution of marriage, particularly within the tightly controlled, image-obsessed world of old Hollywood and the British establishment, repeatedly placed them in the position of living beside truths they had never been offered. Truths that the men in their lives, for reasons of self-preservation, social pressure, professional survival, or simple concealment, chose to keep from them. Their stories are not footnotes. They are the record